Member for Joondalup.
Deputy Speaker. Well. It must be bliss living in a world where you're not held to account.
Order, members. Member for Joondalup, just wait till people have taken their seats. Thank you. Member for Joondalup.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've scared them all off. And I'm such a nice guy. I've got the member for Albany here to keep me company, and I appreciate that. Madam Deputy Speaker, it must be absolute bliss to live in a world where you're not held to account for any statements, for any claims, for any promises or accusations that you make. Being in opposition gives you such free rein from scrutiny. I'm actually surprised that the mob opposite have a desire to return to government. They've got it so much better at the moment. They can make any statement, any accusation, any claim, any boast, and they're not held to account. I came across a fairly great example of that actually just recently when our government was making a number of statements around the mid-year review, and we were discussing the impact that the precipitous fall in iron ore and oil prices would have on our budget surplus. And members here are well aware that the drop-off in price for iron ore and oil was so significant that it caught all forecasters by surprise. However, apparently not for the Labor Party. I came across some quite astonishing claims made by the Leader of the Opposition and the Shadow Treasurer. The Leader of the Opposition declared the deficit that we're facing was utterly avoidable and therefore could not be excused. Wow, okay. Pretty bold statement. The Shadow Treasurer, who I have to say on any other day I have enormous amount of respect for, every second other day. I look at my calendar. Added to that and said, look, the fatal mistake that we made apparently was assuming record high iron ore prices, and he went on to say that what we should have done was run much greater surpluses, significantly larger surpluses, and in saying that he was obviously insinuating if we had been in power, if we were on this side of the House right now, that's indeed what we would have done. Well, that was pretty amazing wisdom. I thought, wow, that foresight, we missed that completely. But Labor would have been in power had they been here post-2008, and they would have run phenomenally high surpluses. Wow. I went, okay. I was interested now. And I thought, well, hang on. I will, hang on. Yeah. I know you're the sole voice of the Labor Party. You're the sole voice, and I respect you for that. I respect you for that, Member for Mandurah. But hang in there. You're welcome to tell me how you were going to do this. But for surpluses to be any benefit for future years, for next year or this year, they have to be ongoing. It's no good.
Member for Mandurah. Ring the bells. Quorum required. Keep going. Thank you, members. Order, member for Mandurah. Thank you. There's a quorum present. Member for
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do ask that they do keep some cake left over for me. Normally a Lamington will do, but so I was honestly intrigued because I thought, gosh, for surpluses to have any benefit in future years, they have to be ongoing. It's no good having a surplus 2 years ago, and if it was a one-off. So if surpluses were the answer to us avoiding a $1 billion+ deficit, well then they need to be ongoing. You need a surplus every year in order for that to be the case. So I went, okay, well how would Labor have achieved this? They're telling us that they could have. They told us that if they had been in power, we wouldn't be having a deficit. The deficit was avoidable. I thought, well, gee, that's interesting. How would they have done that? Because you see, for all of their posturing and all of their boasts, no insight into their financial wizardry was offered. So I thought, well, surely Labor would have left some clues. This was like a bit of a game of Cluedo. Surely Labor would have left some clues about their strategies amongst their plethora of media releases, speeches and propaganda over the years. Surely if I dedicated a little bit of time to it, I could go through all of that information and discover the secret to their economic bliss and happiness. So I set forth, I did. Now we know that if you're going to ensure a multi-billion-dollar surplus year in and year out, as indicatively has been promised by the Labor Party, you've really only got two main options. Number one, you increase your revenues, or number two, you decrease your costs, or a combination of the two. I'm pretty easy on that. So I started my journey with revenues. Yeah, well, there you go. I started with revenues and I thought, well, what could the Labor Party do to increase revenues? Now, remember, the starting premise of this whole discussion is that royalty income, according to the Labor Party, is evil. It's volatile, it's deceptive, you can't trust it, and certainly you shouldn't rely on it in any way. Because that's what they said to us. The mistake you made was that you relied on royalty income. That was a big mistake. And they wouldn't make that mistake. Well, okay, that's a pretty profound statement, considering that royalties account for approximately $7 billion of state revenues. So that's one heck of a surplus you need to run to make royalties irrelevant out of the equation. Fair enough. Anyway, we know that during Eric Ripper's reign as Treasurer, Labor benefited greatly from a stamp duty bonanza on the back of a booming housing market. So I thought, well, maybe that's what Labor's hoping. Maybe they're hoping that there'll be a resurgence of massive stamp duty income from a booming housing market. But alas, as much as I would have loved to see my property values of my houses go up, that is not the case at the moment. So they couldn't have relied on that, so I kept searching. I thought, well, hang on a minute. Maybe the Labor Party was going to fight for a fairer share of the GST for WA. Surely that would be a good campaign to increase revenues. I didn't have to go too far to realise that, no, sorry, Labor vacated that space a long time ago. They're nowhere to be seen. It's actually just the Liberals and the state media, to their credit, the Sunday Times and the West Australian and the other state media outlets that we have, the Liberals and the media, we're the only ones actually pushing for a fairer share of GST. And in fairness to us, we've been continuing that fight, whether it's been Labor or Liberal in power in Canberra. So Labor's obviously not too worried about the GST. In fact, if we're deadly honest, Labor's position, and we heard it again from the Leader of the Opposition, is that, well, the Liberals introduced the GST and so it's their problem now that it's not working correctly. I thought, well, gee, that's not very constructive or working for greater benefit of WA. I don't know if the people of WA would be happy with that. And in theory, it means we should never elect the Labor Party because they're never going to do anything about the GST. I suppose an inconvenient truth for the Labor Party would actually be that the GST had its genesis during the Hawke-Keating Labor years, would you know? And actually Treasurer Paul Keating and most of the Labor cabinet endorsed its introduction. That becomes a bit awkward for Labor. They endorsed its introduction. Never mind. So I left the GST aside. Where else could the Labor Party find revenue for their multi-billion-dollar year in, year out surplus that they would have delivered? What about government fees and charges? What about government fees and charges? If you had been here, member for Fremantle, you would have heard that your own party, your leader and your shadow treasurer had said that actually the deficit we're facing now, I'm not talking in the past, they're saying if Labor had been in power, they would not have delivered a deficit. They would be delivering multi-billion-dollar surpluses. Multi-billion-dollar surpluses. I just want to know how you're going to do it. I'll publish your book if you can tell me how you're going to do it. I'm happy to give you the accolades for it if you can tell me how you can do it. The problem is, you're very good at posturing, you're very good at making statements and throwaway taglines, but you can't tell us how you would actually do it. And we know with government fees and charges, that is a definite no. In the pursuit of a gold medal in populist statements and policies, the Labor Party has pretty much ruled out as evil any kind of increase in any fee, no matter how small. That's very chivalrous of them, I suppose, or socialist anyway, very socialist of them. Any fees and charges are evil. Mind you, it didn't stop them from freezing electricity prices for year after year after year. knowing full well that it was creating an ongoing problem down the track. But don't worry about that, that's someone else's problem. And given the how vehemently the Labor Party has been opposed to any tinkering of fees and charges, I certainly hope that in their methodology anyway, that they would be committed to reversing them if ever they got the chance to be in power. I mean, if not, then that's just hypocrites, isn't it? But anyway, I thought, oh, well, government fees and charges, that's obviously out of the question as well. The problem with that is it left me with an issue that clearly Labor was not going to rely on an increase of revenue to deliver these massive surpluses. So it's going to make it a little bit more challenging, but that's all right. We've still got the other side of the equation, and that's cost reduction. So maybe their master plan is all loaded up in regard to cost reduction. So I went and had a bit of a look at that. But I thought, gee, Labor must have a pretty novel plan. It must be a pretty unique and a good cost reduction plan, considering that every other plan that this government has introduced to tackle rising costs has been opposed by them. So our plans are clearly no good. But the Labor Party must have some very novel ones that are going to come up with multi-billion-dollar surpluses. I wonder, that must be one heck of a razor gang working behind the scenes as we speak, in the shadows. I only can imagine what could possibly be cut by Labor to achieve the outcome that they're bragging about. And I thought, well, hang on, if Labor had been in power post-2008, what would we not have right now in WA? What would we not have now? Well, I don't think we'd have Fiona Stanley Hospital. Fiona Stanley Hospital, I reckon, wouldn't be here. I mean, they seem to be pretty incapable. They seem to be pretty incapable, or at least unwilling, to get that project underway, unless you count a bulldozer and some fencing. So apparently the residents south of the river, they don't really need Fiona Stanley Hospital, so we can forget that. Perhaps we'd have no children's hospital. I reckon maybe they could have cut that. It took this government to get that underway. Surely Princess Margaret Hospital could have coped for another 50 years, shouldn't it? Patch up the concrete a bit, she'll be right. They could have saved a bit of money there. Yeah, why not? We've got good weather, we've got good climate. I don't think we would have had Perth City Link. No Perth City Link, no Elizabeth Quay, no state-of-the-art stadium. I mean, is the label Dullsville really that bad? Not really, we'd learn to live with it, wouldn't we? We don't need to reinvigorate Perth. But the problem with that is I think they were planning on getting rid of Elizabeth Quay and City Link and the stadium anyway to pay for their spaghetti net. So actually I don't think there would have been a net saving. Well, I think they budgeted $3.8 billion and it came in, I think, something like $6.2 billion, considering all the upgrades that were needed. So really they were going to go backwards with that one. Maybe there would have been no widening of the Mitchell Freeway. Maybe no third lane for the tunnel. Maybe no extension of the freeway to Hester Avenue. We can all walk to work, can't we? Why not? We've got good weather. It'll certainly keep the Labor Green faction happy. I thought, come on, Jan, apply yourself. Think more creatively. How would a socialist Labor Party think? Which was very difficult for me to do, actually. But I applied myself. I said, think outside the square. But we do know, actually, that the leader of the opposition has come up with some extremely innovative cost reduction methodologies in the past. When the current leader of the opposition was Minister for Education, we had 264 classrooms at the start of the school year, full of students, but with no teachers. Well, that's a novel cost-down initiative right there, isn't it? Well, that's interesting. Probably not the sort of strategy we would subscribe to, but anyway, they are the alternate government, and that's certainly a very alternate strategy. We tend to like to have teachers in front of our classrooms. And in fact, the whole way that the Labor Party goes about with their mathematics sort of puts them on the back foot in the first place. They seem to operate under their own unique accounting rules, different to everyone else, because the Labor Party is the only party that I know that can look at a budget for a department, take education, where there's an increase in funding every single year, growth on growth on growth, and then somehow turn around and claim that there's been a $224 million cut. That really perplexed me. I know they're generally stupid, but I thought not that stupid. But I thought, well, how the heck did they arrive at that? And my only analogy for the members listening is that it's a little bit like this. You're an employee, you're expecting or hoping for a $10,000 pay rise. Your boss comes along and says, Jan, you've done a great job. Really proud of what you've done. I'm going to give you a $7,000 pay rise. And then the Labor Party turns around and says, I've just had a $3,000 pay cut. In perpetuity. Every year thereafter, that carries forward. So by their mathematics, even though we've increased the education budget year on year on year, because we've rationalised it from an unsustainable model to one that's much more fair and transparent, apparently now there's a $224 million hole. Well, apparently the Labor Party is going to plug that as well. So not only are they going to come up with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, you're fixing up a $224 million hole, which apparently doesn't exist, but then it does, and anyway, it's all very confusing. Well, we know public-private partnerships are out of the question. That is the devil incarnate for the Labor. Doesn't matter how good they are, doesn't matter how much money they save the taxpayer, public-private partnerships are out. Well, okay, move on. Here's something else. What about maybe less police? Maybe that's something the Labor Party could do. You could save a bit of money there. I mean, Labor's pretty soft on law and order anyway. Why would you bother arresting people in the first place if you're going to let them out later anyway? Well, it may be an opportunity. I thought, again, it's not really something that we would subscribe to, but again, I'm trying to look at alternate ways that Labor could save some money.
1/3 discount off sentence.
The challenge for me was that no matter how much I tried to think like the socialist left, I couldn't fathom how Labor could possibly guarantee ongoing multi-billion-dollar surpluses every year without relying on royalties. I just couldn't come up with a solution. And I thought, unless they have the budget equivalent of a magic pudding, I was beginning to think that maybe they were making some pretty silly claims. I thought maybe they were just being a little bit generous with their accusations. I thought, well, surely not. That would be childish, wouldn't it? Just making frivolous claims without being able to back them up. That's pretty childish. In fact, I'd go as far to say that that's actually fairly desperate. That's pretty desperate. And it was at that moment, actually, that I had my aha moment. It suddenly all made sense. You see, during his cosy chat with the Sunday Times, just recently actually, in a rare moment of complete honesty, the leader of the opposition let the whole state into his big secret. What is his big secret? The leader of the opposition's big secret is that he is absolutely desperate to become Premier. He is desperate. He so wants to become Premier. I wonder, actually, if the leader of the opposition sneaks in here late at night, sits in the Premier's chair, tries it out, plays a little game of role-playing. Oh, what would it be like if I was Premier? I must take up his entire thought process. I tell you what, even I cringed. I cringed on your behalf, members opposite. I can only imagine what your reaction would have been when you heard how desperate your leader is to become Premier. If he had said he's aspirational to become Premier, I could have actually understood that. Aspiration is a good trait. Most of the people that vote Liberal tend to be very aspirational people. In fact, most of the population of Western Australia I would define as being aspirational. But desperate? Ooh, I don't know. Desperation can be quite ugly. Indeed, the dictionary definition of desperate says the following: someone who wants something so bad that they will go to great extreme lengths to get it. Someone who wants something so bad that they will go to extreme lengths to get it. Wow. Extreme lengths like maybe saying or promising whatever they need to say or promise just to get their desperately desired power rush from leadership. Don't worry about backing it up. Don't worry about actually coming forward and explaining how you would achieve things. Just say what you need to say, argue, block, oppose, be contrarian. I just want to become Premier, says the leader of the opposition. Well, I reckon that strategy fits the Labor Party to a T. You know, however, there's a bit of a unique irony to this. When the member for Collie Preston stated that he would retire if he thought Labor would lose the next election, the leader of the opposition... May I have an extension, please, Madam Deputy Speaker?
Extension granted.
When he stated that he would retire if he thought Labor would lose the next election, the leader of the opposition remarked, well, you know, Mick sometimes says things that other people might keep to themselves, yet somehow revealing that he himself is a power-hungry, desperate, will say and do anything to get elected wannabe Premier, well, that's somehow okay to share with the whole world. Don't get me wrong, we had the leader of the opposition pegged years ago, and we do appreciate his honesty. At least the rest of the state know his true intentions and motives now. But talk about the pot calling the kettle black. The leader of the opposition went on to say, please call me Mr. Resilience. Well, I don't know, maybe we should call him Mr. Desperate instead. I think that there's a lot more accurate description of him. This is not a case of buyer beware, but rather voters beware. Voters beware. We have someone that is so delusionally in love with the concept of becoming Premier, he will do and say and promise and block and obstruct whatever he needs to just to get into that seat. He'll work the rest out afterwards. But you know what? That is actually also where the Labor plan comes unstuck. You see, in order for the smoke and mirrors, the unchallenged throwaway media sound bites, the unverifiable promises and all of the like to have any impact on the electorate at all, Labor is assuming that the WA voting public are fools. Labor is taking WA as fools, and that is Labor's biggest mistake. West Australians are no fools. They don't buy the doom and gloom being peddled by the opposition. They don't see WA as a second-rate state, unlike the leader of the opposition. West Australians are hard-working, aspirational people who are proud of this state of ours. So you see, Labor can oppose and block and complain and scaremonger and make outlandish claims, but in the meantime, the Liberal National Government will continue to deliver stable, mature governance. We will deliver on a great vision for this state. We will take the people of Western Australia with us on this journey to a better tomorrow through good times and challenging times, and we know we've got some challenging times ahead. Labor dropped off that journey long ago, and your silly rants and stunts continue to fade into the background as you're left behind. With that said, I actually wouldn't be surprised if there were more than just a member for Collie Preston that consider their future in the 18 months ahead. You can have your Mr. Desperate. I think I'll stick with our steady leadership team any day of the week.